All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, or to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen, like a computer. Don't look like there's any new questions in there at the moment. So get your questions in there and we'll get them answered. While you guys are coming with questions, I'm just going to get a little refill here. If you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for questions to be asked. There's no questions being asked, so I'm wondering if we're getting to a point, because it's been like this for a few weeks now, and nobody's asking questions. So it's kind of like I'm wasting my time a little bit. I maybe got a handful of questions, like 3 questions yesterday. So if you guys aren't going to ask questions, we may have to stop this office hours because nobody's asking questions. And then you guys won't have a way to get your questions answered ever. All right, here we go. Justin G says, "Hi Q, just logged in. Can you speak to the arrow lag concept and late lag acceleration concept you guys talk about in some of your videos? Now that translates into creating more angle at the top of the downswing and holding it at impact, i.e. the power position. Trying to tie these 3 concepts together." So it's not that we're holding anything. We don't want to hold on to it. We want to create the lag and then we want to let it go, right? So what a lot of people are doing is they're throwing out the club from the top. So they get up to the top of the swing and then they throw it out right away. So when you do that, you're just not going to have as much speed at the bottom of the swing. And you're also going to release the club early, so you're going to add loft. So what you want to have is that lag. We want to let that club load basically to this lead arm parallel position. And then from here, where we have lots of lag, we want to release that out in front. So I'm not holding on to anything. I'm just releasing it out in front instead of releasing it out the ball. So there's lots of reasons why people have trouble with this. One is coming down steep, right? So if we start down kind of over the top, one thing that a lot of people will do is they'll stand up out of it to try to get that club shallow out, because you can see how when I do that, that gets the club to shallow out. The problem is that I've had to move my chest away from the ball, and if I do that, I have to release the club early to get to the ball, right? Another reason is an open club face. So if I'm coming down, my club face is open. I got to get that face back to square. If I release this club out in front like that, if I rewind that to impact, that face is wide open. So what people will do from that open club face position is they'll release it, because releasing it squares it up, right? So those are kind of the 2 main things that people struggle with. Because the reason why a lot of people struggle to get lag is because the face is not in a good position, and we're not shallowing out the club properly to be able to not have to stand up out of the swing, right? So a lot of times people had trouble releasing the club more out in front, mainly because they're doing something to try to hit a functional golf shot, right? What do we need to hit a functional golf shot? I need ball first contact. I need center face contact. It doesn't even have to be perfectly center face contact. If it's close, it'll usually still be very functional. And then I need my club face and my club path to match whatever ball flight that I'm going for. So if I'm trying to hit the ball dead straight, I need my club face, meaning the direction my club face is pointing at impact, and the club path, which is the direction the club head is moving through impact, so in to out, out to in. I need that to be fairly neutral, right? That will produce a straight golf shot. If I'm trying to hit a draw, I need to have my path in to out. I need to have my face a little bit close to that path, but open to the target. If I'm trying to hit a fade, I need my path to be out to in. I need my face to be open to that path, but a little bit close to the target, so that way the ball can start to the left and curve back to the right, if that's the ball flight that I'm looking for. That's what we need for a functional shot. So what a lot of people will do when that club face is open coming down, right, because they're trying to hit a functional shot, they want to hit the ball in the direction of the target, they'll release it, roll those hands over, flip the hands to try to square it up. Because if they didn't, and they came in and into impact with shaft lean and released it out front, that club face would be wide open, and now the shot isn't functional. It may look great at impact with lots of shaft lean and all that stuff, but your club face isn't at place. So that's the biggest reason why I see people struggle with lag and releasing the club properly, is because the club face, how they have the club is coming down, whether it's not coming down shallow, it's coming down steep, and then we're shallowing it by standing up, or the club face is open, so I'm really releasing it. Sometimes people, it just feels more, what people a lot of times do in golf is they do what feels the most powerful to them, right? And to some people, releasing that club early, throwing that club out from the top feels more powerful, right? Doesn't mean it necessarily is, but it feels more powerful to them. So people will a lot of times will, trend to go more toward what they feel is more powerful. So that's really what it comes down to. So if you're struggling with creating lag and releasing the club properly, a course that I would really recommend checking out is a 20-minute shallowing fix, because it addresses both of those things I just talked about, right? It addresses coming down steep, and it addresses an open club face. It gets your club face more closed. It helps you to get the club more shallow. So if we can get that working better, then you'll be in better shape typically. If you really want to work on, get down to it, and make sure that you're doing the right things, and you're kind of working through the things as quickly as possible, I'd highly recommend doing the online lessons, because the instructor will be able to look at your swing. Unfortunately, there's no way I can look at your swing. There's no way for me to know exactly why you might be struggling with it without seeing your swing. But I can see your swing through the online lessons if you want to do that. There is a link above the video if you're interested in that. If anybody has any questions about the online lessons, I'll be happy to help them. I really try to keep it simple for people. Stick to the things that really matter, and get a lot of success doing it that way. All right. So Willis says, on a straight putt, where should you contact the ball to get the putt to roll true? Is it on the equator, slightly below the equator, inside, straight through, or somewhere else? It's going to be slightly below the equator, because the ball has loft, or the putter has loft on it, right? So any club that has loft on it, you will be contacting the ball below the equator if you're hitting it with loft. If you're hitting that, you can't really hit the top of the ball above the equator unless you have negative loft, right? And you wouldn't want that in putting, because that's going to you're going to hit the ball into the ground. So basically, typically what happens, where's that ball? Oh, here we go. So I got one of these balls that's like half white, half black, right? So there's the equator, right? So a typical putter is going to have around 4 degrees of loft on it, right? So when you're coming in, I know that's more than 4 degrees, my hand here, but you can imagine how it's going to be a little bit below the equator of the ball, right? That loft, we need that loft, because whether you realize it or not, when the ball's sitting on the green, it's actually sitting down in some grass a little bit, right? It's not like a marble surface, it's actually, there's grass there. The green is grass, and then it's sitting down in that. So you need the loft to get the ball up out of it, so that way it can start rolling, right? Now, we don't want to have too much loft, because if we get too much loft, then we'll actually introduce backspin, and that will make the ball skid, and it won't roll very well, right? And we don't want to hit down on the ball with negative loft, right? Because then the ball is going to bounce into the ground, and we don't want that either, right? So what we want is the putter to come in. You'll hit it slightly below the ball, and this is whether it's you said it was a straight putt. This doesn't matter whether it's straight, breaks left, breaks right. It does, none of that matters. To get a pure roll on the ball, you need to hit a little bit below the ball to lift the ball up out of the grass. So it'd be slightly below the equator, and then hopefully the ball will kind of like knuckle a little bit, and then land, and then start rolling. That's what we see. That's typically what you see in the best putters. That's typically how it works. If we get too much loft, backspin, it skids. If you get too little loft, you get down into it, and then it bounces. So one thing that you can do is you can look at it in super slow motion. Use your phone. Most of these phones nowadays have slow motion cameras on them, and you can see these things. So just set up your phone and have a ball to where, this ball is probably be the easiest one to see. But now if you want to get one of these, you can get them at Eyeline Golf. Eyeline Golf. It's just like a training ball is all it is. But if you have like a Pro V or whatever that has kind of the line along the side. So here's a Snell ball. You can see how it's got kind of a line. So I would have that facing the camera, and then I would putt it, and then I would see how that how that goes. If it backspins too much, then you probably have too much loft. I would have your hands maybe a little bit more forward and keep them forward. If you are hitting the ball into the ground and it's bouncing into the ground, you're seeing that, then you probably have the shaft leaning too much forward, right? Because a putter has 4 degrees of loft, right? But that's with the shaft straight up and down, right? So if I have the putter like this, that putter is going to have 4 degrees of loft on it. If I do that, I've taken the loft off the putter. If I do that, I add loft, right? So if you're coming in, let's say you have the putter straight up and down, and you come in and maybe you're adding a little bit as you're coming in. I see this all the time where people have the shaft straight up and down. When they come in to hit the ball, they actually kind of add loft, and that adds backspin, and then the ball might skid a little bit, right? Sometimes I see people who maybe have it like this, but then they bring it back and they actually kind of lag it a little bit, and then they get the hands too far in front, and then it hits down on it, right? And then you get above the equator, it's down on the ball and it bounces. So that's how you would kind of look to see, is use a slow motion camera like your phone. Make sure that you set it up like this, facing the phone, and then see how that ball reacts, and then adjust accordingly. So Billy W says, what tips do you have for getting out of a hard packed, soaking wet sand in a bunker? So basically, what we have to understand is how a normal bunker shot works. So if we're in fluffy sand, what I'm going to do, and the reason why I'm going over a fluffy sand, because it's going to help you to understand what you need to do out of any kind of lie in the bunker, right? Any kind of sand in the bunker, right? So what I'm going to do in normal sand, fluffy sand, is I'm going to open up that club face, 30 to 45 degrees, somewhere in that area, right? And the reason why I'm going to do that is because, one, it adds loft, which will help me lift the ball out, and two, it exposes the bounce, right? So if let's say I have it square like this, this is just like an approach wedge. There's not a lot of bounce on it, right? But if I have it square like this, and if I hit the leading edge, or if I hit the sand with this leading edge, that's going to make the club want to dig, right? So now if I take it and I open it, now you can see what's contacting the sand first. It's this bottom part, the bounce, and that's what we want. We want this to hit the sand, because that kind of acts as like a rudder and allows the club to glide through the sand and come up out of the sand. If we let the leading edge hit the sand first, it's going to want to dig. So a good way to kind of think about this is like water skiing. If I'm water skiing, I want to have the nose of the skis out of the water, so that way I can glide on top of the water. If I get the nose of the skis angled down, those skis are just going to want to dive into the water, right? So it's the same kind of thing. So I'm going to open up that face 30 to 45 degrees. I'm going to get a nice wide stance. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is a wider stance helps you to get your hands lower. Getting the hands lower adds more loft, right? It adds more loft, which will help you to lift the ball up of the sand. It also exposes more bounce, right? And the wider stance also gives me more stability. Sand is generally not the most stable thing to stand on. So if I get a little bit wider, it gives me a little bit wider base. It gives me a little bit more stability, right? So I'm going to get my face open. I'm going to get my stance wide. I'm going to get my weight forward, right? And I'm going to hit down on that sand. I'm really going to hit down and try to really hit that sand hard. And I'm going to do that 3 or 4 inches behind the ball. And then I'm going to let the ball come up out of the sand. And the reason why I lean forward, and I'm just going to stay leaning forward. I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to stay leaning forward. And I'm going to hit that spot, right? And then the ball comes out nicely, right? That'd be like a normal sand bunker. Now, the reason why I tell you this is to now let's understand if we did that exact same thing, but let's say we're in the bunker that you're talking about. Well, what's going to happen, what can happen, not necessarily what will happen, but what can happen is you may end up actually kind of bouncing. The club may bounce off the sand, not dig into the sand at all, because it's harder and wet and packed down. And then you may end up kind of scolding the ball, because the the wedge doesn't actually get into the sand. So all we're going to do to hit out of these wet, packed, more sand bunkers, right, is to tone down on the anti-digging things. We just want to tone them down, right? Now we still don't want the club to dig a ton necessarily, right? We don't want to just, give that up, but we're just going to tone that down. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the face a little bit less. So instead of having the face 30 to 45 degrees open, I may have it 15 degrees open. Now, I would tell you, when you're in a sand bunker, you have the face exactly this much open, and you do this and that and that. The problem is there's no definitive method, because not all sand bunkers are created equal, right? Some are more forgiving than others. Some you might go to one and it's like concrete, and you may go to one where it's actually normally kind of a fluffy sand bunker, but because it just rained or something like that, it's wet and more packed down. It's not fluffy, right? That one's still going to have a little bit of give to it because it is normally a fluffy sand bunker. One that's just always concrete may not have much to give to it. So basically, the harder it is, and the less loose sand that there is, the more you are going to tone down those digging capabilities of the club, right? So like I said, and the way that you know what to do is by practicing it. It's by experience. I can sit here and tell you how to do it, but you really won't get good at it or really know or understand how to do it until you actually go do it. You have to do some learning by doing a little bit. So basically, what I would say is you're going to open up the face less some amount based on how hard it is, right? You are going to, now we're still going to get wide. We're still going to get low. We're going to hit a little bit closer to the ball, some amount, right? We're going to swing with a little less speed, right? Because when you have hard sand and you're hitting closer to the ball and you're using less loft, right? Because you're not opening up the face as much, you're going to be catching more of the ball, so you don't need as much speed. I actually, if you ask me, I actually prefer to hit out of a wet sand bunker because I just think it's easier. It's a little bit easier in my opinion because it's a little bit more straightforward once you kind of get the hang of it. But yeah, and then the next thing is hit that. You still want to hit that sand hard. That's one of the biggest things. I used to really struggle. So I'll tell you a little bit of story about myself with the sand. So I grew up on a little 9-hole golf course. When I grew up there, they have a few more bunkers now. But when I grew up there was one bunker on this entire course, and you could play an entire year and never go into it because it just wasn't really in play that much. It's a greenside bunker, but it's on a side of the green that's you're not ever really hitting over. So it would be kind of rare that you would go into it. I could probably, in a given year, I'd probably play, a couple hundred rounds of golf, 9-hole rounds of golf. So I play this hole a few hundred times, and I'd probably go in that bunker less than 5 times, if I had to guess. It was a small bunker too. So I never really learned to hit out of bunkers until I actually went to college. I played college golf, and I entered college golf without really knowing how to hit out of bunkers at all because I just never ever hit out of them. And then whenever I would play a different course, I would just avoid them at all costs because I just didn't. I knew I didn't really. I could get it on the green, but I didn't really have much control over it. Right. Most of the time, I could get it out and hopefully have like a 20-footer to save, but it didn't always work out that way. So I had to learn how to hit out of bunkers, and I struggled and struggled and struggled. And it wasn't until the biggest light bulb thing for me hitting out of bunkers was understanding that we want to hit that sand and we want to hit it hard, right? So what I would recommend doing, and the good part is that this works whether you're on fluffy sand or if you're on hard, more packed sand, because we got to get the club underneath the ball, and the way to do that is to hit down on it hard. And if we use the bounce correctly, when we hit down on it hard, we hit down and thump that sand hard, the club's going to come up out of there because you're using the bounce. And then if we don't do that on these harder, bunkers, they're more packed down, then the club just may not get underneath there. I find that a lot of people are coming in very level with the ball, and when you do that, that's just going to make the bounce more bouncy, right? I want the club to get into the sand, but I want it to come out of it, right? And the way that you do that is by hitting the sand hard and then using the bounce correctly. So you're gonna feel like I will tell you right now, I basically come over the top on my bunker shots. And when you look at a lot of the best players, that's what they do too. Or a lot of players hit the ball this way. Colin Morikawa, great bunker player. This is how he hits his bunker shots. He brings it up and he drops that thing straight down right behind the ball, and the ball comes out pretty nicely. So that's kind of the major thing that I would recommend doing. Once I did that, the bunkers, it became fairly easy. I was getting within 10, 12 feet pretty much every time, and usually I was quite a bit closer than that because I actually had some control over the ball coming out. So it was a little bit more consistent going through there. I was able to hit the spot. And that the other thing is, so the two major things for me that helped me was, one, getting my body forward, keeping it forward. If you do that, it will help you to kind of hit that spot on the sand. Really focus on hitting that spot on the sand and practice hitting a spot on the sand, right? If you can get good at that, you can be good out of the bunker and then hit down on that spot. Really, the angle of attack, I would try to feel like that club is going straight down into that sand on that spot. And if you do that, that will get the ball nicely up out of there. So Billy W says, is the common phrase compress the ball into the ground misstated? Isn't the ball compression created by the face of the club against the ball and not the ground? So here's what I would say to that. Is that literally what's happening? No, you're exactly right. The ball, you are not hitting the ball into the ground and then it's, it's bouncing off the ground coming out. Yeah, it's the face is doing that. I don't mind that as a feel though for a lot of people. If you're someone who struggles with compressing the ball, hitting down on the ball, getting the hands in front of the ball, I think that can be a great feel, even though that's not literally what's happening, right? I've heard, there's some instructors that are very literal with, with things, and if that's how they teach, and but I like feels too, right? I like to be literal, and I also like to have feels. So I think it's good to have the student understand, okay, that's not literally what's happening, but I think that can be a great feel for you to have, right? Just like, I think we had one earlier where someone asked, or yesterday, where someone asked, is the golf swing more of a lead side swing or a trail side swing? It's both. But it could be a great feel to maybe feel like you're a lead side or trail side, depending on the golfer, right? Even though that's not literally what's happening. So, we've heard the phrase, feel like your trail arm is along for the ride. Well, if you're really too overly active with your trail arm, it kind of takes over everything. It may be a great feel for you to feel like that trail arm's not doing anything, but it actually is, right? You're just maybe toning it down a little bit to get the desired result. So I wouldn't call it I wouldn't say it's misstated. I would say it's not literally what's happening, but I do think it can be a great feel for a lot of people who maybe struggle with hitting down on the ball and getting shaftly and things like that. Feeling like you're trapping the ball in the ground, right? Not literally what's happening. It kind of feels like that's what's happening, but that's not literally what's happening. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it's not literally what's happening, but it could be a good feel. It would be my opinion on that. All right, we got about 20 minutes left here if we have any more questions. Sorry, somebody is knocking on the door, I think. Or might be. All right, should be good to go now. That package is delivered. All right, we got about 15 minutes left here if we have any more questions. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time.